Hello students, today we are going to study about joints of skeletal system. Let's first know what is a joint. Joint is a point of contact between bones and cartilage or between teeth and bone. Means the place where two bones meet is called as a joint. Now what is the utility or function of joints? Joints bring about all the movements in the bony parts of the body. So because of the joints, our skeletal system moves. So it is a point of contact between two bones, right? Next, we will come to the types of joints, right? So the classification of joints. See, the joint is divided into three categories: immovable joint, partially movable joint, and freely movable joints. What is an immovable joint? Here the joints are fixed. That means the two bones that meet each other are fixed by a fibrous connective tissue very tightly. An example we find in the skull bone. In partially movable joints, the joints allow little movement. Okay, so they are joined by the help of cartilage, which allows little movement. And we find such type of joints between sternum and ribs, and joints between vertebrae. Then the third category is freely movable joints. And in the freely movable joints, you find that the bones at the joint are capable of free movement. And because they are moved freely, there is a fluid between the two bones, which is known as synovial fluid. So there is minimum friction. And such type of joints are also called as synovial joints. We find them at the elbow and the hip joints, right? And also your shoulder joint and the knee joints. Now, these freely movable joints are divided into these four categories: ball and socket joint, hinge joint, pivot joint, and gliding joints. What is a ball and socket joint? In this ball and socket joint, you will find there are two bones. One bone has a ball-like end which articulates or fits into the cup-shaped depression of another bone, right? So that they move. Both the bones, they can move in all planes. So the joints, it shows movement at 360-degree, right? And next is the hinge joint. In the hinge joint, it allows restricted movement in one plane, just like the hinge of a door or a window. And they are capable of bearing heavy loads. We find such type of joints at the elbow, the knee, and the finger. The third category is pivot joint, which allows rotation about an axis like a pivot. So here it's a joint between the first two vertebrae, atlas and axis, on which the head rests. So that is the movement or rotation of the head at this particular joint known as pivot joint, because these bones, I'll be showing you how these bones are fixed, right? Having a pivot like structure. Then the fourth category is the gliding joint, where the bones glide over each other to some extent, just slide or glide, but they don't move out of their place. We find such type of bones at the wrist and at the ankle. Okay. Then next, this is an animation in which I'll show you how the bones are in the skeletal, they're attached to form joints and what kind of movement we find in these joints. So let's come to the major three categories. You see, this is the skeleton of the human body. You can see how the different shaped and types of bones are arranged in this manner. This is the skull, which has fixed bones, right? The flat bones. And this is the sternum, the ribs forming the rib cage, and at the back, this is the backbone, the vertebral column. See, a slight movement is possible here. And then this joint is a freely movable joint at the knee and at the hip and also at the foot. So here you find a free movement. Now, what is the difference between these places? In the skull, see, this is the skull which is of having fixed joints, backbone having slightly movable joint, like I said, and the knee movable joints or freely movable joints we can see. Okay. Now see the skull. These bones are flat bones as you can see, and this is the joints which form sutures, right? Or they are fixed. You can see the flat 8 bones, and other bones of the face also are immovable. So there is no movement, and as a result of which it protects the brain or the most delicate part of our or the organ of our body. See, it provides protection to the body parts. Okay, and then there is slight movement. See the bending in front and backward bending due to the vertebral, and there is slight movement between the sternum and the ribs. Okay, so they provide support to the body. You can see how the skeletal system here, the backbone providing support, and this is freely movable joint. You can see free movement at the knee and at the hip joint, right? Now the face, you can see this lower jaw, see how it is movable. Only this bone is movable, right? This is mandible and the upper jaw is maxilla. All right, now you know about all the different types of bones now. Now let's come to the ball and socket joint. Again, let's see. This is the joint that allows the greatest range of movement. You can see how this baseball player is moving his hand freely, right? Backwards and sideways and downwards. See? So this type of joint, one end of the bone. There are 2 bones here. The one end of the bone, you can see here forming a ball-like structure which fits into the cavity of the other bone, right? That is in the shoulder bone. Okay, so they are of course held together by a skeleton. Now in the human body again, let's see. This is the joint. Okay, you can get it in the exam also. This figure. See, to identify, this is the shoulder joint, or this is your humerus, and one the apical end of the humerus. This is forming a ball-like structure which is fitting into the glenoid cavity of the scapula. This is scapula or the shoulder blade. You can see, and this cavity is called as glenoid cavity, into which the wall of the humerus fits in so that it shows movement in all directions, right? And this is again the hip joint. The other one is hip joint here. This is the pelvic girdle having the 3 bones, and in the pelvic girdle, this is the acetabulum cavity, right? Acetabulum, into which fits in the ball-like end of the femur. This is the femur, right? And this is the ball end of the femur, right? So this shows the freely movable joint, that is ball and socket joint. Next we will come to the hinge joint. Hinge, like I said, see, just like a hinge of a door or a window, it moves in one plane. So this is with only small amount of rotation which we find at the knee and at the elbow. So this is formed by the joining of the 2 bone ends which have a smooth surfaces, and they are shaped to move against each other with minimum friction because there is a fluid which is known as synovial fluid. Of course, the synovial fluid is also found in hip and shoulder joints. Okay, now let's see this synovial joint, or this is your elbow joint. You can see this free end which the ends are covered with the cartilage, articular cartilage, see, which restricts friction. And in between the 2 bones, you can see the synovial fluid which is kept in the synovial membrane or the sac. That is your joint capsule. And these are long bones. The compact bone and the spongy bone from the structure you can see, and this is at the center which contains bone marrow, and you know already that the bone marrow is responsible for the formation of blood cells. Okay, now they are held, these 2 bones are held together by ligament, so there is no sliding of the bones. Okay, that is your at the elbow joint. Now let's see at the knee joint. This is also similar. The 2 ends of the femur and the tibia and the fibula, right? So this is the tibia, the strong bone, and the fibula, this is the narrow bone. And they are also joined by the articulate cartilage, and within a capsule the fluid is also present, which is your synovial fluid. But only difference in the knee joint is there is one extra bone here, which is the patella or the kneecap, right? So they are also held by the ligaments. All right. Now we will come to the pivot joint. Now, pivot joint, I said, it allows only a rotation of the head. So it works by the end of one bone having a peg-like structure which fits into a ring formed by the other bone. So these are the first two bones of the vertebral column, atlas and axis. Okay, atlas is a ring-like bone. Axis has a peg-like structure on which you can see here in the figure the head rests, so that you can rotate, okay, between your head, which allows us to turn, raise and lower our heads, okay. But this is also a crucial joint which controlling balance and maintaining awareness, because the spec like structure, if it's bent back or thrown back, like in case of a person committing suicide, the peg enters into the medulla oblongata and it causes instant death. Okay. Now next is the gliding joint. The fourth category is the gliding joint, and here there is slight movement or motion between the small bones. We have the small bones at the wrist and at the ankle. So these small bones can move over one another, that increases the flexibility of the hands and feet, and they are held by strong ligaments so that they are not allowed to move far away from each other. So they glide over. That's why it helps us in movement of our wrist and the ankle. Sometimes we put maximum amount of pressure over here, right? Okay, this is all about the different types of joints. Okay, so thank you. We will stop here. Hmm? What is-